third Saturday of every month, and occasionally I present myself. Today we have Mr. John Dutto, going to speak on air traffic control. John's a good friend. He was a docent here before. I've been a docent here for 7.5 years, and he was here before I arrived. And he was an air traffic controller, probably one of them, 1982, and he's still an air traffic controller in the San Bernardino, the old Norton Air Force Base Tower. So a lot of experience. If you got any questions about anything that's ever happened here in Southern California dealing with airplanes and incidents, and get your questions out. John is a very talented guy. He was almost a professional bowler. Bowled some sanctioned 300 games, but more importantly, I want to show you this. When he was a docent here, he used to present for kids here on Family Day. He was a ventriloquist. You see this? Yeah. Do you notice what his dummy is? Maybe you'll see it.
Looks like a pilot.
Yeah.
For Alaska.
Well, Captain Cody.
Captain Cody.
And you might want to ask him, where is Captain Cody today? He'll tell you all about it.
He's in the repair center.
I do remember, true story, I was an airline pilot for Alaska Airlines and a military pilot. So I was talking to another pilot here in the museum, and we were talking about John. Pilots love to talk to air traffic controllers, especially John and I, because we probably spoke on the radio a lot. And we did narrow down some incidents specifically. But I showed him this picture, and I said, this is what John thinks of us. All right, so without further ado, take it away, John.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank everybody for coming out. And yes, my name is John. I was an Air Force air traffic controller initially from 1974 to 1978 in the beautiful city of downtown Del Rio, Texas, if you've ever had the pleasure. We trained T-37, T-38 pilots down there. I threw out the little award things that they had for younger GIs. I won a couple competitions, and I got an hour at T-37, an hour at T-38. So pretty solid head rush when you're going 600 miles an hour at 21 years old, and you're wondering which ends up. But that's why I started my air traffic control business. How did I pick this career? I have no idea. Because when I decided to go into the military in 1974, the recruiter back then, there was no computers to look at, so they just give you a big catalog of things, and they said, film through this and see if you can find a job that looks interesting. So I did, and I'm done. Okay. So I knew I wanted to do something with airplanes. I didn't want to be a mechanic, because I wasn't a mechanic in Columbine or nothing like that. So I see a picture of a guy standing there in a blue suit and a microphone. I said, I want to do that. The guy says, you want to be an air traffic controller? Yeah. And I couldn't even spell it. Really. And so 18 years old, here I am learning this stuff, and they're putting $1 million pieces of equipment in my hands and my voice. So anyhow, that's what I learned to do. It was very fun, very fast, entertaining. I did not have to have a college degree in this kind of business, and you still don't. So then in 1981, they had the FAA controller strike on August 31st, August 3rd, 1981. And so I think, well, okay, this might be a good time to get a job. And so I applied and took the test and all the things I have to go through to do that, and passed successful interview. So approximately 5 months later, I was hired. And so when I was hired, I was expecting to get assigned, say, Hawthorne Tower, some of these small local airports. And so the guy, when I picked up the line, he said, if we offered you a job at Los Angeles Approach, would you be able to accept it? I'm thinking, I guess you got the right person. I said, yeah, I'll take it. So 2 weeks later, I started Los Angeles Approach. So Los Angeles Approach is one of the busiest approach controls in the world. I mean, yes, New York, Chicago, and stuff like that. Los Angeles is very busy in its own right. We had 4 parallel runways there. So training-wise, it took from 1982 when I started, we had about 12 or 15 people having to train at the same time. So training was very not easy to come by every day. So there was days get to training because just too many people go around. So it took me approximately 2 years to reach what they call the full performance level, German level, whatever you want to call it, where you can do everything by yourself. So you learn different incremental parts of it, and as you did, then you were certified to work that by yourself all the way up to the top. So 1984, I reached that, and so the way the FAA works in the air traffic, in the air traffic control business, when you turn 56, if you live at home, you have to retire. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You turn in your badge, and they walk you out the door, and you live. Now, if you accept an office type, administrative type position, you can work till you're 80, but you don't have to take physicals and all those kind of tests anymore. So 56, bang, you're out the door, no questions asked. So I was out for a few years, and then I decided to become a volunteer at the museum. So I did this for about 3 or 4 years, and I'm like, okay, I got to do something different. So in the air traffic control world, many smaller airports are under what they call contracts. So there's roughly 5 companies in the United States that run contracts all the way from New York to Hawaii. And so I'm thinking, well, I want to be near home, I won't have to go too far and stuff like that. So I got on the computer, started looking at applying, found out there was a couple openings out here in San Bernardino. That was the closest I could get at the time. And so it was just funny, the guy that is the manager there used to work for me in the 1980s when I was a supervisor. So we quickly reconnected and got hired and stuff like that. So very fun job. If you have younger children, grandchildren, whatever the age bracket may be, highly encourage them to try to take an air traffic control test to get hired, because as we speak, there are thousands of people short. Back in July, they had an open test. The FAA had an open test for hiring. They had over 53,000 applicants throughout the United States. How many they're going to hire, I do not know that part, because that changes from time to time. So, as far as staffing-wise, they have approximately, I think the number is 13,500, give or take a few, in the whole United States. So, of those, that number of people, there's approximately 55% of them are eligible to retire right now. Will they? No, they'll wait till they're 56 to officially retire. But, and their strategy, if you want to call it that, of staffing and getting things up to snuff for a safety-ish type thing concerning airplanes and people's lives and stuff like that, do they do a good job of that? Probably not. And so could it be better? Probably so. Will it? I don't know. So they're always going to be hiring, they're going to be needing people. Typically, hello, thank you, coming in. So typically they hire, and unfortunately they hire about 1,500 a year. They think, okay, so now okay, that's a fine number. But by the time they get around 3 months later to offer you that position, you may say, no, I'm working for Amazon, now I'm doing this, do that. So okay, they check that off. So they don't refill the slot. So then they say, okay, we're gonna hire this other amount. So then once they hire you, they send you to a place in Oklahoma City, which is where the FAA has their Air Traffic Control Academy. Okay, so you got to go past that. You got to jump through that hoop, and so they may lose 35 to 50% of those people. So now at 1,500, you ended up with about 300 or 400 people, and now they have to be sent all over the United States. And unfortunately, you don't get your choice. I want to go, so I'm near home. They may send you to Lincoln, Nebraska. They may send you to New York. You may live here in California. So it's just a process. Now, so I was very fortunate when that strike happened, because they needed people right in the immediate area. So I was very lucky, because the guy offered me, he said, would you take a job in Miami? Yeah, okay. Could you take a job in Chicago? I didn't want to, but I said, yeah, I can. And so I ended up in Los Angeles. That was fine. So, many things go on through the FAA all day long. There's many advancements in equipment. However, it may be slow, they still are advancing. And there's a lot of safety issues. Things are slowly improving. And unfortunately, the way that things are improving is because of bad stuff happening. And so they're trying to minimize that. They have done a good job over the years. They still have a long ways to go. A lot of airplanes are flying these days, record numbers. Even before the COVID, they had some and set many records. COVID's kind of slowed them down a little bit, but now they're back on track, and things are just going all over the place. They have some of the major approach controls that handle traffic. For example, what they call Southern California approach, where I worked at. We handle traffic from basically just south of Bakersfield to the Mexican border to as far east as El Centro, Palm Springs, and that area. So on a daily basis, we as a unit, so we had Los Angeles, we had Burbank, we had Santa Ana, we had San Diego, and all kinds of other airports. So on a typical day, we would work approximately 6,500 airplanes a day. So, and that's a lot. It's just a lot of responsibility for a certain amount of people have to do. So back in the early days in Los Angeles, and well, still today, we went through downtimes of traffic and uptimes of traffic. So on a daily basis, now Los Angeles is pretty much landlocked. Okay, they have 4 parallel runways, tightly situated. They got a lot of property to the left and right, and to the east of the airport, and ocean to the west. So typically on a busy day, we could work up to 1,800 arrivals and departures a day, which was a lot. Because there was no what if type things. Everything was very structured, and you did the same thing every time, every day. You didn't say, well, hey, y'all, let's see how this is going to work, because it probably wasn't going to work. And the other thing about working as a team, so you should quickly learn how to do that if you've never had to do that before. So you may be sitting arm in arm with somebody that you didn't particularly like, or didn't agree with, or whatever, and it's like, but you have to do, everybody knew as a team what the other guy was going to be doing. You didn't second guess them, so even if you didn't like that guy, you didn't say, well, watch this, see what happens. So you respected everybody's position, what they did. There was fortunately, we didn't have any squabbles about stuff, because that could have been very ugly. So, ugly things, yes, happen, from minor ugly to disastrous type ugly. So in August 31st, 1986, I'm sure many of you were around, they had the Aeromexico accident in 1986 from Cerritos. So unfortunately, I was one of the 2 guys at the controls that day. So unfortunately, that'll stick around forever. That doesn't go away. There was a lot of things that happened because of that. A lot of guys use the term graveyard engineering. So after that happened, a lot of good things did happen because of that. It was very unfortunate what took place and how it took place, but there was nothing that we myself and the other guy, could have done to make it not happen. Today, in the airplanes, little airplanes, and big airplanes, when I say little airplanes, general aviation, the Pipers and Cherokees are sections of people who's training to learn how to fly, as well as the airliners that fly international, as well as the airplanes that fly in the States. They have a thing in the airplane now. It was very primitive at the time, back in the 1990s when they implemented it, as opposed to today where it's a very fine working machine. It's called TCAS. It's called Terminal Collision Avoidance Systems. So whether you're in a Cessna, whether you're in a 747, you have a little round square box sitting beside you. So as the computer radar in the airplane is picking up a target, it will display it on your thing. It will tell you there's a target 300 feet below you. It'll tell you which direction it's coming from. It'll tell you how fast it's coming from. So back in those days, it was kind of a primitive looking system, but now it's almost like I'm watching TV. Walter can attest to a lot of this equipment I'm talking about, and it has saved thousands of situations where it could have been very ugly or deadly. Okay, and so when a pilot, they have procedures for this equipment now, and so it's called a RA. So the term RA means a resolution advisory. So if a pilot tells me I'm getting out, so he may see a target I can't see, because I'll tell you, there's some equipment that I have up here in the town. I don't have radar. My eyes are my radar, so I can't see every single thing that's out there. That could be a conflict. Okay? But when you're flying at big airports and stuff like that, they get this more sophisticated stuff. So he says, he may say, I'm getting an RA. Okay? So now if he has to, the procedures are now, if he has to respond to that RA, so now the equipment tells him what to do. The equipment will tell him climb, or turn, descend, whatever the situation may be. And he doesn't say, And no, I'm not going to. So then if he decides to not take that advisory, he will have a phone call when he gets on the ground. He'll have to make a phone call to the boss, say, why did you not respond to that? And he may lose his license on the spot. It just depends how urgent the situation has been. So when he tells me I'm responding to an RA, I tell me what you're doing, turn your climb. So now if he says I got to turn, I got to climb, yeah, he may have an airplane right above him, he may have an airplane below him, and so now I got to get those guys out of the way real quick, because that could become ugly. So that stuff is being minimized, new equipment, new procedures and stuff like that. But those are some of the little residual things that could happen because of this new equipment. So like I said, it does prevent a lot of phone calls, it does prevent a lot of people from getting scared. So, but the equipment is there, the pilots know how to use it, the general aviation pilots are very aware, know how to use it, they use it very well. So they have a lot of briefings around Southern California, many airports like this that give pilots a little bit of an insight about the names of the equipment, the technology, the improvements, and all the, if it's computer driven, all the additives on the computer that they make to make it better. It goes through hours of testing to make sure the bugs are out of it as best as they can before they put it into your plane. So when you're going through pilot training school, whether you're in a Cessna, whether you're in a 747 or whatever, you're trained to use this equipment. You don't just say, well, I'm not going to use it, now I'm going to turn it off. That's not an option, unfortunately. You have to be able to use it, know what to do, and when it starts barking at you, you got to respond to it. So that's just a general picture of all these things like yellow and green, that kind of stuff. There it is. That's what weather looks like on some of the scopes. So sometimes on your TV you'll see some of that in the morning. That's just a little storm that's popped up along the west coast. It's some up in Canada and stuff like that. So all this yellow mass is just airplanes. So on a typical day in the United States, there can be up to about 6,500 to 7,000 airplanes up there at any time. Now, as nighttime comes along, it kind of fizzles out. But then at nighttime, this whole eastern region coming from South America on up, it's just solid with airplanes going across, going over to Europe. And places you never even heard of. But it's busy, it's just airplanes, airplanes, airplanes. They have a tremendous amount of biz jets these days that fly to and from everywhere. They're all concerned. Well, these people get this money to fly these planes, but they do. In and out of Las Vegas. I did a 3-year stint in Las Vegas for a couple years. It was amazing to see the amount of biz jets that come out of that place and the amount of money. So, like I said, it was just a snapshot of what the airspace may look like at different times. This picture is this number right here, it's one of 21 what they call air traffic control centers. So the air traffic control centers are basically places that handle the airplanes above 17,000 feet, all the way up to about roughly 45,000 feet is where the airliners cruise in and out. They handle a lot of military traffic. There is some areas in there specifically for military operations. It's different areas are more busy with military stuff than others. So this one here is beautiful downtown Farmington, Minnesota. So that's what's called Minneapolis Center. So there's 21 places like that across the United States. There's Los Angeles Center, Denver Center, Chicago Center, New York Center, something like that. So they're just named kind of geographically. And some of them are kind of remote areas, not in your ideal locations to live. Like for example, Los Angeles Center, you'd think that it's a nice flashy place that's in beautiful downtown Palmdale on Avenue P. So make a trip out there someday. But that's where they put Los Angeles Center. Why, I don't know really why. So over the years, since the roughly mid-70s, they've closed, 1, 2, 3, 4. They've closed 4 of these air traffic control centers in places where they didn't have that much traffic. So they combined up the operations and the personnel and reassigned them to different areas. So that's how they did that. So that's typically what an air traffic controller scope in a terminal environment may look like. Much more modern looking than what I started out with. But so these gadgets right here is the radar. This is what is called his keypad. And so as he's not looking, he's in a simulator right now, so he will typically have a lot of dots representing airplanes that has, each dot will have an alphanumeric associated with it. So as you're flying along in your jet, your Cessna, whatever, you're going to be assigned, if you're flying what they call instrument flying conditions, you'll be assigned a transponder code, like your PIN number, so to speak. So it's a 4-digit code. So as the controller is moving along, he will tell you to squawk 4 digits. It can vary. So as you do, then the radar sensors and the computers that they have will start tracking the information, and all of a sudden it'll display your target. So you display a little target about yay big, and then it'll give the alphanumerics of your call sign, whether you're November 1, 2, 3, 4, you're Alaska 123, or whatever. And so that's what the guy is going to assign his headings and all the information. Now he may have one airplane on there, and then 20 minutes later he may have 20. And so everybody's going in the same direction, to go in the same path, whether it's east or west, north or south, whatever component of that particular airspace he's working. So at Los Angeles, you basically, believe it or not, when I first started there, they had 4 controllers to work that whole airspace around Los Angeles. And today there's 6. So it's not a big operation. It's a very small amount of it, because like I said, it is been very well designed. It was designed back in the 60s, before I know. And it's very efficient. So there's no questions about who does what, when things happen, and you just work it. So everything you do is recorded. So everybody's microphone is recorded to a thing, so if something happens, they go back and play the tape and say, what did the pilot say? What did you say? And so if it has to go into a court of law, then that's what happens with tapes. So you have to be very careful what they say, how they say it. The pilot has to be very thorough in what he reads back, because if he reads back something different than what the controller said, that could be a problem somewhere. If each party has a signal, okay, something happened. So around the United States, there are approximately 520, probably a little bit more than that now, of air traffic control towers. Air traffic control towers meaning it could be as small as Riverside Towers, it could be as big as Orlando Tower in Florida, which is about 365 feet tall. So they're very big. They have different types of equipment in it, depending on the amounts, the types of airplanes, and whether it's a commercial airport, whether it's a general aviation airport, whether it's a military airport, or a training airport, whatever the case may be. So pay-wise, you get paid according to the level of activity where you work. So for example, Los Angeles, you were in the top notch, so you were always at the top pay grades. So starting out at a smaller airport, say like Fullerton or something like that, you're going to start out at a lower pay grade, and you will eventually work yourself up to higher positions and higher pay. And so if you like to work overtime, this is a job to have, because they have, in some places, it's blanket overtime. They'll work, a lot of guys will work 4 10-hour days, because that's the maximum they can work per day is 10 hours, and then their 5th and 6th day, they'll work 8 hours and 8 hours of overtime. So typically in a week, some of them can work up to 16 hours a week just overtime. And they make a lot of money. So, and like I said, this job does not require a college degree. They would like to see a little bit of college on the resume. It's not mandatory. So just to give you an idea, down there at this place called Southern California Approach, where I retired, there's guys down there with, I got an associate's degree making close to $300,000 a year. And they still got 10 years to retire. So they'll complain about it, but they don't complain about the cashing that check every week. So there's a little over 10,000 jobs of generated by the aviation.
Million.
Yeah, 10 million, whatever, I can't read it. So that'll generate from mechanics to electronics to whatever. It's all throughout the GDP, I guess you might call it. And so there, I said 13.5 earlier, so apparently there's 14,000 plus air traffic controllers. Now when I first started in 1982, the number was 12,500. So since then they've only increased 1,500, which they probably should at least not double, but at least greatly improve what they do now. Will they ever change that? Probably not. Okay, so we have many pounds of freight per year flown, just this in the United States. Okay, so it's a lot of zeros to look at. So freight has grown tremendously over the past 10 years, I don't know, probably longer. They have, as you know, Amazon is huge down here at this airport right now. They're starting to become huge. They're in San Bernardino. We have 767s. We have approximately 14 767s that fly in and out of there every day. We were just told that either November or December, Amazon will be adding 8 more flights a day in 737, which is a smaller airplane, but it's configured to haul freight, not people, so it can haul pretty good amounts of freight. So they fly, their 767 fleet is pretty much retired U.S. air carrier type airplanes, both from, let's see, United, Delta, and American, mostly. There's a few other mixes in it. And these airplanes, just to give you an idea, are 25 years older and up. They're not brand new airplanes. So they're maintained very well. They still have to maintain a very rigorous maintenance schedule, but they fly a lot. They fly in the middle of the night sometimes when we're sleeping. So back in the 80s into the 90s, Los Angeles was the #1 in the world as far as the freight ports. I'm sure that number has changed because they fly freight all night long when we're sleeping. It's pretty staggering. Up at Anchorage at midnight, it is freight city. 747s flying here from 740. It's staggering just to look at some of the data out there. Okay, 167,000 plus general aviation airplanes, all the way from the riverside airports to Redlands airports and stuff like that. Some of them do have control towers, some of them do not. These days there is an extreme pilot shortage, so if you knew people that's interested in getting into the aviation pilots, getting into an airline seat, currently these days you can get an interview to get hired with roughly 1,500 hours of flying time. You can fly the Cessnas. Naturally, you want to try to progress as much as you can to make it good on your application to whatever airline you may be starting at. So these smaller airlines, the commuter airlines, the feeder airlines, whatever they want to call them, are hiring left and right. They're hiring all across the world, not just the United States. But 1,500 hours in the United States seems to be the time that they will take your application, you can get an interview. And then depending on the various qualifications that you have in the airplane. Oh, what are we going to tell you? Okay, so that's flight hours per year. That's just some statistical stuff. So as far as oceanic airspace, the air traffic control system in the United States, that is what is calculated 24,100,000 square miles just of oceanic airspace. So that's a lot of water to have to watch out for. So back in the days, back in the 80s, they did not have ADS-B and all the gadgets that you hear about now. And so once they crossed certain ports of the ocean, they just had to rely on time estimates between themselves and where they were at. So you just had to hope that guy in front of you knew what he was doing, and that guy behind you knew what he was doing, because everybody had to go on pilot reports to go these transatlantic routes. And now it's 90% of it, probably most all of that, is all controlled with ADS-B, and it's very easy to monitor and put more airplanes over the water all the time. So that's roughly your passenger count per day, almost 3 million passengers just in the airline world per day. That's just the United States. It's probably more now, I'm not sure how old this data is. And what's not, everybody's got masks on, so it's been the last couple of years, I guess. And so I said 6,000, or I think it's closer to 6,000 these days as far as the peak traffic around the United States. And so then you got to wonder about, sometimes there may be thunderstorms here, there may be snow here, there may be hurricanes here, tornadoes. So everything has little factors on how many airplanes are going to get up in the air at one time. Sometimes you're flying in and out of Chicago or New York, stuff like that. You may encounter a 1-hour ground delay before you even get up in the air because there's so many airplanes already up in the air. They just have to flow it very smoothly instead of just cramming them up there, because now you've got a safety issue. You get too many airplanes going up there. The controllers are going to get too nervous of this kind of information. So these are what they call terminal radar approach control facilities. This is one of the facilities that I worked at Los Angeles. So there's approximately 147 of them around the United States, and so all the way from the Floridas to New York to Seattle, San Diego, and all. So this encompasses many military installations. So the FAA controls a lot of the military airplanes, not all of it, but a lot of the stuff. So the pay ranges, once again, on this kind of stuff, can range from the bottom end all the way to the top end if you work in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, stuff like that. So let's say you worked in Omaha, Nebraska, you would be kind of get paid in the middle range. And so as far as advancing in the FAA, if you want to do that, say, okay, I'm tired of working in Omaha just because I want to go work someplace else, you can put in bid paperwork and stuff like that, as long as you're qualified, good employee and stuff like that. You say, okay, we're going to let you transfer. And sometimes you can say, I want to transfer to Dallas, I want to transfer to Chicago. And wherever there may be hardships of controllers that are needed in various parts of the United States. And so, unfortunately, sometimes when that happens, it can create a shortage in the facility that's losing. So if they're not able to gain somebody to come in to fill that slot, if you do that too many times, you can have some controller shortage, which down here at this one of these places I deal with every day has a huge amount of shortage. Whether that's ever going to change or not, don't know. Not anytime soon. Okay, so U.S. airports, there's roughly 19,000 of them in the United States alone. And so last time they counted, there was 5,300,000 square miles of United States airspace. So that's a lot of airspace, a lot of stuff to watch on a 24-hour basis. And just staggering number. Okay, so here's what if you heard the term radar. So this is what a radar may look like. So this is your, what they call the waveguide up here on the top. This is just the structure. Some of them can be very short in stature, some of them very tall, depending on if there's mountains in the area, stuff like this for coverage. Back in the day, these things were very primitive looking. Now they're a lot more modular and effective what they do. So the people that work on these are also work for the FAA. They're just maintenance. They don't like to be called technicians. They're called technical operators. And so we used to call them maintenance. They used to have a fit. They call them maintenance. So some of these facilities are very small. Some are very large. Some are put in very remote sections of the United States. Some of them are situated in mountains in Denver. And something may happen. They got to send technicians out there to work on it. They may be 10 degrees below zero out there with 30-mile-an-hour winds, but that's their job. That's what they can do. Another one, just in wooded areas. So how many of these? There's what they call long-range radar towers. There's approach control towers. So there's a number of different kinds of towers that they use these days. And what the breakdown numbers is, I do not know that. Okay, so here's Los Angeles Control Tower. Kind of looks like a flooded control tower built back in the 1990s. Very goofy design. I'm not sure why they come up with that for this to use. So that tower alone is about 290 feet tall. The previous tower to that was 156 feet tall. So even with this tower right now, there are places around the airport that are blind to them where they can't see. So there's special procedures where the airlines have to announce their position and let them know where they're at as they taxi along. And then if you get a combination of fog and stuff like that, it makes it even more harder to see. And so now they're talking about building a tower taller than this. Whether that's going to happen anytime soon, I don't know. So talking about being able to see the airplanes going on the ground. So sometimes there's so much ground to look at, like an airport like Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth, places like that. Now they have designed radar where the controllers can actually look at the scope and they can see the airplanes taxiing and moving along the ramps, and they have ID numbers on them, so you know specifically who is out there on the ramp moving, whether it's a maintenance truck, so in the days when you get some fog, you can't see the tail of the 747 sometimes. But now in this specific radar, you can see him actually moving, and it'll say it's American 123 or whoever it is, and so now the controller doesn't have to rely on position reports as they're going down the runway. They can watch them on the scope. And they know how many to let on when the weather gets cruddy. And so, like I said, that's Los Angeles Airport. I don't know how many more on there. Okay. So this is what a pilot may look at on his display on his aircraft, on his what they call situation, on his primary flight display on a jet. It looks a little bit smaller than this when you're flying Cessnas and stuff like that, but this is what they call an approach plate. So this approach plate goes to runway 25 left right here, where the runway assignments are down here. All these little, but all these little names are fixes along the approach. So the approach starts out here with what they call river, which is about 53 miles east of Los Angeles. So all these fixes, all these altitudes that are on there, these are the altitudes, 10,000, 9,000, 8,000, 7,000. So the controller has to be able to write these things down in a training environment and be able to know exactly what all these fixes are and where they're supposed to cross. It's not like, well, what's he supposed to be here? What's it? He knows, just bang, 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 just automatic. So the airplane, the nav systems in the airplane are programmed with all this data. So once the controller, or once the controller tells the pilot, okay, you're cleared for this approach, he pushes roughly a button on the autopilot that says engage, and the airplane will automatically fly these fixes, just right down to the T. Now, in case there needs to be an interruption, so okay, the option cancel your approach, do this, do that, then the pilot has to take over manually and basically do a reset. And so sometimes he has to get resequenced if he's too high, depending on the nature of why he was canceled to begin with. It could be because of traffic, it could be a number of things that could change the situation. So the yellow stuff up here in brown, that's the mountains north of Los Angeles, the Mount Baldy's and stuff like that. All the dots represent a different altitude, various restrictions on 4339. There's a tower out there or something. But it has a very good contour display. Same thing on the pilot's display. He knows exactly where the contour is. And so the information inside the airplane, talking about contours and stuff like that. So as you know, around here in Los Angeles, they have a lot of mountains. So there may be days where it's cloudy and foggy, whatever the case may be. You may be out there in the airplane flying along, and the pilot and the controller gives you a turn to a certain point. And all of a sudden, if you're within a certain, I don't know, I think it's 3 miles of this, I'll just say mountain terrain, there's a feature in the airplane that will, and it will definitely get your attention. It'll say terrain, terrain, terrain. It's like, okay, now all of a sudden you got water running down your head because you can't see it. You just, the airplane has said, there is terrain near me. And so it's called the pilot's called a GPS, ground proximity warning system. And it's very loud, it will get your attention very quickly. And I got to hear it one time, it was scary. But, so you know what I mean? So the airplanes are very well situated, a lot of safety devices let you know there's mountains out there. So in the event the pilot has turned to the wrong heading, which happens because they're human, they make mistakes, or in the event the controller is given the wrong heading. So now the pilot may say, okay, I got terrain coming up here in front of me, what am I going to do? So the controller may give him a turn. Various things can happen when that, because that's a nasty warning sign when it comes out. It'll get you could be dead. That thing already. So there's 4 runways in Los Angeles, and so each runway has its own approach plan. So as you're coming in Los Angeles, the controller is going to assign you runway 25 left, 25 right, 24 left, 24 right, and so you're doing all your pre-stuff in the airplane, setting up all the things for the approach. So once you have everything set up, then the air traffic controller say, clear for approach 25 left, 25 right, whatever the runway assignment may be. And so the airplane will typically fly this thing in. Now, there are certain approaches at certain airports that are set up with what they call visual approaches, where the pilot can take over visually and do this. But he will still have all these fixes along the way as backup, where he knows he's not supposed to go below this point here at this point. So it's a very common thing for airline jets to fly visual approaches. I don't particularly like them myself because I've seen a lot of them go awry, but it doesn't matter what I think. Okay, so this is another map that if you're going to learn how to fly in Southern California, this is one of the maps that they introduce you to for the various airports. Some of them are less confining than that, but this has we got a lot of airports down here. So there's a lot of restricted airspace that you have to know how to interpret, know how to stay out of, because if you get caught in one of these restricted airspaces, because the FAA has all kinds of neat little ways of tracking you down, and your phone may ring once you get on the ground and say, we need to talk. And so it may result in a slap on the wrist, it may result in you losing your license for 90 days, just all kinds of things may happen. So they don't try to be very punishable, but they want you to know you have goofed up somewhere and don't do it again, because it could be disastrous. So, like I said, it's hard to explain right now, but there's a lot of those things that pilots have to be aware of when they're flying, especially in Los Angeles Basin. And then, as you as a general aviation pilot, you've got a stack of paper maps and charts and stuff like that on your blade that you got to keep neat in order, so as you're progressing along, you move these charts, because you don't need to be fumbling through them when the controller's trying to ask you a question. Stand by. They don't have time for that. So here's another more of the approach plates for various runways. There's 25 left, and then other runways are 25 right, so it's a little bit more magnified. As you can see, the fixed and all lines mean something. It looks kind of confusing here, but it's very well organized and situated. Okay, so here's what the things I was talking about earlier that was called data blocks. So each one of these airplanes are just assigned a 4-digit code, like your PIN code on your computer, and so it will pop up with your call sign. This call sign here is what, Continental 438, so that's old, and we'll say we'll give him the speed, it'll tell you the speed of the airplane, what altitude he's at as he's descending, so it's very extremely accurate. And so in the event you were about to switch off, they would lose the target, and that's not a good sign either when the target falls off. So as you see, there's just a number of airplanes on this particular individual scope. These long lines that you see here is called leader lines. They can make the leader line very tiny, or they can make it very large. It all depends what they want to do. And so, as typically the measurement between one airplane to another is basically a sum greater, but basically 3 miles. So if you're in this airplane, the closest airplane to you can be 3 miles away, period. And if it gets any closer, then there's a problem. Well, the controller may have a problem, the pilot may have a problem. It all depends on who's creating the situation. Now, if you're out there flying VFR, and a VFR type Cessna 172 or something like that, you may be a quarter of a mile away from another airplane if you're not paying attention. So it's pretty scary way. So here's a little bit more fancier looking picture of what we saw in the air traffic controllers earlier. This is kind of like the place where I worked at when we retired. Okay. So you may be working in a place that has 10 of these scopes along the road, maybe 3, maybe 2. These are maps and data of what your airport configuration is. So in the event that you need to stand up and look at something, get quick information, you can look up right there and have that information instead of having to thumb through a book. These are the scopes. These round things right here are called compasses. So they're based on 360 degrees for a turn. So once you get into the bigger things, you, the air traffic controller, don't want to have to think about what heading should I give this guy. You got to know it. It's just second nature, but it's why they keep these things still on there, I don't know, but they got to have them. These little square boxes with lights, that's their keyboards, so as you're going along, they have to make various functions to enter, to tell the computer, can do this, do that. So it's just communication, basically. Some of the data right here, each airplane, as it goes through, whether it's New York or Los Angeles, come out with a flight progress strip. I don't know if there's a picture of one later, but it will give the guy an airplane's call sign, tell him what kind of airplane it is, tell him the altitude, tell him the route that they're going to fly, all kinds of things. So this is not something the pilots did. This piece of paper about this long, that's for the air traffic controllers. So as the airplane progresses, whether it's a departure, arrival, en route, or whatever, these flight progress strips will print out at the sector that is handling that particular airplane. So there may be a couple hundred an hour, maybe 10 an hour, just depends on what time of day or where you're at. Okay, so here's just a couple different presentations of the radar, different levels of weather along the line. So you, as the air traffic controller, can set the amount of weather that you want to look at. So if you know there's thunderstorms in the area, you can set that you know, okay, I only want to watch the 4 and 5 intensity because that's generally the most ugly type thing. And the display in the airplane has a very similar feature where they can kind of filter out what they want to see and what they don't want to see. Because naturally they're trying to worry about the passenger's comfort, and so the controllers is trying to keep you away from the more stuff that may have a lot more bumps. Now there's times where the controller says, you got to go right through it because I got traffic on the left and right, and you may not use the pilot, may not want to go through it, but it's like, tighten up your seatbelt and put your coffee down and pay attention. It'll be over in a couple minutes. Okay, so this is kind of like, pick up some of the charts in the backseat of the airplanes that may tell you the routes that your airline may be flying to various cities. It's not necessarily something that the air traffic controllers are going to see because there's much more there are many more cities, as you can imagine, in this one. And so we talked about centers earlier. So this is another one called Chicago Center, which is based in Aurora, Illinois. And so this is their airspace that they watch all the way over from the Indianas to whatever's west of Chicago out there, Minneapolis Center boots up, Cleveland Center boots up to the west of that. So these three particular centers all day long are busy with airplanes, and that's in a good weather condition. So as the weather starts mounting up, the icing, the snow, the cold, the wind, and whatever may give them a fit, it does, and it shows up on their scopes just like we saw earlier. So the controllers know how to deal with it. Sometimes they have to minimize their the amount of airplanes that gets into their airspace. So they may call Los Angeles, they may call Denver, they may call Chicago, New York, or Miami, and say, I need 20 miles of trail going to Chicago, or whatever, to minimize the activity, to make it a safer place to come in and out of. So that's a presentation that I did some time ago. So if you can ever believe you landed in the wrong airplane. Okay? So 22 times since 1996, airliners, I'm not talking GAs, I'm talking about airliners, have landed at the wrong airport. And these were seasoned captains. And so part of the other issue that I always had was with the air traffic controllers, and in short, clearing them for a visual approach, whereby the pilot would take his eyes and ears off the command and just visually fly. So this particular airplane here is one of the ones I talked. It's a Dreamliner. It's a huge airplane. It's a 787 that has been modified to carry parts of an airplane that's going to be built for the 787. So this type of airplane, one night several years ago in McConnell Air Force Base in Kansas. So the airplane's coming from somewhere on the East Coast. So now he's getting up north of beautiful downtown McConnell Air Force Base in Kansas. And he's about 100 miles north of the airport. So nice, clear night in Kansas, and everybody can see everybody. And so the controller, why they do this, I don't know, I never was a big fan. But they would ask the pilot, can you see the airport? And the pilot said, yeah, I see it. So then the controller said, clear for visual approach to whatever the runway was. Okay. So this guy, and I found out later on that he had problems in training, and somebody overlooked it. And he turned off he didn't turn off, he just didn't pay attention to his gauges anymore. And so unfortunately, as he's flying into that, kind of picture yourself, so he's trying to fly into this airport that he wants to go to, McConnell Air Force Base, but just off staggered to the side of it is a smaller GA airport, the airport. And this runway here at McConnell is about 13,000 feet long, or 2 miles long. This airport over here, their runway is about 6,500 feet. So he turns it off and he actually sees this airport. So he shifts off about 10 or 15 degrees, lines up. So then this is about midnight. This happened. So and he hasn't said a word because he's the only airplane out there. So he lands, and so the controller at McConnell, which is a military controller, McConnell Air Force Base, hasn't realized he's not landing here. And he should have known that within a couple minutes, this big, gigantic behemoth should have already landed. So the pilot tells the tower, he says, this is, I'm not going to say the name of it, he says, we're not sure where we're at. So now you picture he gets up, he's looking around, I said, where are you at? I said, don't know. Okay, so now you should have sweat rolling down your face. Unfortunately, there's no passengers in this airplane, it's all cargo. So the pilot had to get on his computer and GPS it to figure out the coordinates as to where he was at. So he had landed at General Jabara Airfield, and he was about 4 miles off center where he was intended to be. And so now the guy at McConnell Air Force Base is scrambling. Where are you at? He said, tower, he says, we landed at Jabara. And so now the military controller should have had bells and whistles going off for him a long time ago, but nobody has ever brought that information up. I was not able to secure that. So why he couldn't look out the window initially and say, yeah, I see you out there, But he should have had bells and whistles go off saying, you're too low, because he landed way short of this runway. So, found out years later, this guy went back into training for a while, but he was later on dismissed because of something else almost happened. So he was he had 22 years as a captain, he was dismissed, and the co-pilot is, well, I don't know what he's, so that's how it's a cavernous thing. So they put parts of the airplane in there to ship them around the United. There's about 7 different places around the United States where they build a 787, and so this airplane, I think there's 4 of them that fly all around the United States and carry these parts. Yeah. So this is the big runway where he was supposed to land, but he landed at this little tiny airport over here. So visual, and so okay. So another one happened. I'm not sure which one that is. Oh, okay. So this is a military airplane. This is a C-17. So it's got to be an Air Force C-17. So the pilot says, "Oh yeah, we see the airport." So he's out there flying. I'm not familiar with the Florida airspace that much, but he was somewhere out here. He said, "We see the airport." He lands the wrong airport, and so the Air Force had a few questions to answer about that. Nobody got hurt, just scared to get what everybody. Okay, here's another one. So these 4, probably 5 that I know of, all happened in about a 4-year period of time. Now they haven't happened in many years. I don't know why, but anyhow. So Southwest is scheduled to go to Branson, popular airport down in Missouri, I think. And so the controller asked him way up here, he says, "Can you see the airport?" Pilot looks down, he's up 25,000 to 30,000. Yeah, I see it. And so, clear for his approach to Branson Airport. Okay? So he gets out here, and the pilot gets out here, and so it's like 10 o'clock at night, there's not much going on. So he gets out here, and he's turning, and so the other controller that has cleared him for the approach calls Branson Tower on the phone and say, "You see Southwest?" No. And so now this controller's getting worried, saying, "Where's he at?" So a few seconds later, Southwest lands, there's not a control tower there. Southwest says, "I think I'm not in Branson." So here you've got passengers, the whole airplane is loaded with people, baggage, because Branson's a very popular touristy town. So the airplane landed, almost went off the end of the runway because it was a shorter runway than what they were planning. And so they had to be, passengers had to be bussed out. So they had to send a bus to get all the passengers because they couldn't even move the airplane. And all the baggage and stuff like that. And so then they had to make a 180 to the runway, whatever they had left, to bring the airplane out and to get the airplane. So that crew was not working. I think they're flying Cessna somewhere. So these are the airplanes now working at San Antonio Tower, where I live. So they are Breeze Airlines, if you've ever heard of that. They just started up about probably 6 months ago, and now they fly into San Bernardino. They fly from San Bernardino, Frisco, Provo, so they just fly that trio of airports right now. They're talking about expanding. I don't know when, I can tell you that. Amazon, like I said before, we had approximately 12 to 14 arrivals and departures a day just at Amazon. And these are big airplanes, they're not little Cessnas. So here at San Bernardino, we have to, little general aviation airplanes have to compete for runway space because we have them landing on one runway and the 767s coming in opposite direction of each other. So now, I don't have radar, so I have to look out the window and think, okay, beat that guy, so I have to do a lot of head math. You got a hole, because I don't trust you to get off the runway right now. And it's not their fault, it's just, they're just sometimes not aware. Amazon, oops. So Amazon, right there, so like I said, we have a lot of them come in, a lot more projecting in. Are we going to get new equipment in there anytime soon? Don't know, a lot of rumors, but rumors like, you know what? We store a lot of airplanes out of San Bernardino. Airplanes that aren't going to fly anymore have been retired from the airlines. We've probably got close to 100 airplanes out there that's being stored that are never going to fly again. They just sit there and look nice. So when you fly in San Bernardino, it looks pretty busy, but they're just parked there. They're not doing it. We handle a lot of general aviation traffic. We handle, just last week, we had a G7 come in there from France. What happened going back to France? Let's see, before yesterday, one came in from Madrid. And so if they land there, because we have 24-hour customs, So they land there, as long as the crew has their paperwork in order, they can land there, get their paper stamped, get the baggage, get the trash out of the airplane, and they can be back up there in 15, 20 minutes. Whereas if they want to go to Los Angeles and do this, it may take 3 hours to go through customs. So they're in and out of there pretty quick, and boom, and procedures are pretty simple to get out of Los Angeles. There's no big, not a big delay or problems getting in and out of there. But that just about includes on my slide. So if you've got any questions, if I covered anything too fast, yes, ma'am?
So with artificial intelligence becoming the new reality for most jobs, how threatened is your job for the future with artificial intelligence?
Restate your question. How long?
So artificial intelligence is the future, is here, and more and more jobs will be taken over by robots and what have you. So as far as your area is concerned, and
so far not. That is nowhere even in the future. Yes, they have talked about it, but that's a very extremely critical thing. If the human involvement wasn't there, things could go squirrely real quick. I don't know if I can answer your question too technical about it, but I realize artificial intelligence, about that kind of stuff. But in this world, it's a lot of human involvement, and will be for years. As far as the equipment that's being developed now, it's still a lot of human involvement. And there has to be, what if something fails? What's that artificial intelligence? Because, yes, you're right, they're going to talk about that for years, but so far, no development to say, okay, it's going to be out in 10 years, nothing like that. It's kind of gee whiz if they do, but that's it, not on the horizon.
you still need that human involvement.
Yes, yes, so far. Now, whether they will ever be able to, some of the engineers, I'm sure, are very brilliant behind some of this stuff, may be able to develop some of it, but right now they can't, they don't. The only thing that has been developed very safely so far is, we got the literature, is called, you can look at this on your phone, it's pretty phenomenal information to look at, because it's not AI, there's just a lot of data. So look under ADS-B 1090 exchange on your computers or your phone, and you can see airplanes all over the world. You can see their altitudes, you can see where they're going, you can see how big they are, how fast they're going. And so let's say, okay, I want to look at Singapore. You just type in SSS for your airport, boom, you can see everything on Singapore. You can type in JFK for Kenya, boom, you can see JFK. And at night, you can watch the airplanes over the Atlantic coastway. It is phenomenally crazy what you can see. Some of the tracking systems, another one called flight tracker, you can see the weather that's building up around the United States, whether in a very centralized area, United States wide. You can see on the flight tracker, you can see, type in Los Angeles, you can see the proposed flights out of Los Angeles for the next 2 hours, proposed departures for the next 2 hours. So a lot of phenomenal information that wasn't there 30 years ago, and now is there. So could it have been sooner? Don't know, but they're working on it to answer your question. Yes, ma'am.
What's the backup plan for a 9-point earthquake at LAX?
Okay.
What does everybody do?
So, first thing I do is get scared. Okay. So, because I've had it happen, not a 9.0, but enough to scare you away. So I'm working one night, 5 o'clock in the morning, 1994, if I'm not mistaken, 1992, and I'm the only one in there. So I'm working all the arrivals coming to Los Angeles, coming all the departures. And our floors were like this, just concrete. And I'm standing up all these pipes because I'm sleeping. And I'm waiting for my partner coming to relieve me. And all of a sudden, start here. Now, this building that we worked in at the time was a corrugated steel building inside the World War II hangar. So now I could hear it. And so I'm hanging on these pipes because I don't want to fall down because I stood there, well, these guys don't know what's happening. And so I got about, I think at the day I was about 8 of them strung out over the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean coming to Los Angeles about every 10 miles. And so one of the pilots says, what's going on down there? I said, we'll have an earthquake. I could barely say that. He says, I'm going around. Because, yes, to answer your question, because of the structure of the runways, it cracked the ship, so the airplane would land on them, hit one of the cracks. The disastrous type things it may not have, but it could be very scary. It could break gas lines, it could break electric lines around the airport, it could do all kinds of stuff. So fortunately, this guy just said, we're going around, and I asked him, I said, how'd you know? He said, I could see the dust rising from the ground as the ground was shaking. So then I had chaos on my hands because I had about 10 others behind me, and then one did the same thing. So I just shut the airport off and said, stop, nobody else is coming in, nobody else is going out right now until I get this situated. So then, in a major airport like that, they have to send out airport operations to inspect the runways to make sure cracks, nothing disastrous has happened to the runways, taxiway, anything affiliated with the landing, taxiway airport. Then after about 45 minutes, I had help, and we got everything situated back on the ground. But so those type of procedures are not trained for as much as they should be in a classroom, because that's basically all you can do in this kind of business is in a classroom. Here's what you do when. So until it happens.
But those pilots go left, and then who picks them up? Where did they just go fly around until somebody finds them?
No, because the air traffic controller watches on the radar, so he sees every move the pilot's making. So I'll ask him, say, which heading do you want to fly? And so if I can approve it, I will. If not, I'll say, no, you can do this and climb and that. So I don't let them just fly willy-nilly, because even though something has happened, you still have to maintain positive control of the whole situation. You can't let them, because then that could create another round of, you know what. So we have, like I said, and then, so back in, let's see, 2000 something, early 2000s, we had another earthquake centered down in, somewhere in San Diego at the time. And so this building that they built in 1994, that I was working at the time, the operations portion of the building was built on rollers for earthquake purposes. So these rollers were designed, and this is a massive building, I can't even give you an exact square footage, but it's built on rollers, so in the event the ground starts shaking, it's not gonna jerk with you, it's gonna be a slow roll. It goes. Okay. So, and when it did, I'm like, you gotta be kidding. And so here we are just rolling back and forth, and you don't know if this thing's gonna last 10 seconds, you don't know if it's gonna last 10 minutes. But now everybody's screaming, shut up. And so it seemed like 2 minutes later, everything's calm, and now the phones are ringing, and so unfortunately that was all. That's the last time that happened. I was out of there after that. But so yes, things happen, and they have to be. They're trained in the classroom what to do, but are they trained in reality what to do? So it's just like a tornado or hurricane comes through, man. What are we going to do? Just do the best you can to make sure no one gets hit.
But you know a hurricane's there. You don't know the earthquake's coming.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
In many cases, yes, you're exactly right. Yes, sir.
If you were taking a commercial flight, are there any airports you would prefer to use?
Myself? Oh, I like Atlanta.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Atlanta's got 5 runways. They run, on a good day when the weather's nice and they don't have any goofy things, they run 3,500 airplanes a day. So they're very effective at what they do.
Okay.
And they have top-notch equipment. When they say we want something, they get it tomorrow. Whereas Los Angeles, they say, yeah, we'll get it to you in 3 years.
So what's the worst one? We hear San Diego's dangerous.
San Diego's landlocked. They're very tiny, yes. I won't say dangerous. It's a tiny runway, and as you're flying over from the east to the west to land, you're going to land over those freeways. And so as the pilot crosses those freeways, he's got to do an extra little drop to make sure he flares out on the runway at the right time. And so then, when we get fog and all the other stuff in the air, it's like, so now they have many more flights than they used to, so that adds to the complexity. You have a lot of GA traffic, you have a lot of biz jets, things like that. So at various levels of experience working in a tower. So they're not 25-year veterans like in LA's and Chicago's and New York's and stuff like that. So you got to kind of go at their tempo. So is it dangerous? I don't know if I would put the word maybe, but I would look to go to another airport myself. Okay, anybody else got any more questions? Yes, sir.
You described, the air traffic control system is pretty sophisticated and complex, though I've seen articles out there in terms of homeland security and everything saying that it is not a very secure system. I mean,
It's secure as far as air traffic control stuff. Okay. Because there's various levels of security just to be an employee. You gotta go through this just to get in the building. Okay, so there's various levels of security around the airports that you, as a bad guy, can get in if you wanted to, just like we experienced a few years ago. So I'm sure if you were bad enough, you could get in somewhere like that. But in the air traffic control thing, it's, I would say it's pretty secure as far as the employees and stuff like that, because they're checked, screened pretty often for drugs and stuff like that, bad stuff. And I had never encountered bad in-house type situation. You know, everybody hears about stuff in the airport and stuff like that. Will that ever be able to be curtailed? I don't know, with all the crazy people running around.
Yeah.
Sir?
Has the FAA considered raising the retirement age to help alleviate the controller?
No. It will be like that forever. So I found out years ago that is it's an accounting term. I can't remember the accounting term right now. But they don't want you now. At one time, you could work past 56. I can describe to you. So in this workforce, I think I may have said, at 56 you have to retire. Period. Doesn't matter who you are, what you turn in your badge, they walk you out the door, you're done. So before 1980, they had a grandfather clause where you could work past 56 as long as you could pass the medicals and all the criteria that was required. But it was an accounting term that somebody back in DC, our lovely friends back there, decided we don't want these air traffic controllers making more than a junior congressman when they retire. So we're going to limit how much they can make when they retire. So that's why the number came up 56. Don't know, but that's what they positioned everything. They said, okay, if they retire here, they can only make this as being retired. They don't want to make more than a congressman being retired. Dumb, but that's, and they're not going to ever change that. Now, as a contractor, I can work on 80 or 85, as long as I can pass the test and medicals and all that kind of stuff. But our pay is always the same. Whether you've been there 1 year or 20 years, it's always the same. Okay.
What was your experience like when 9/11 happened?
So 9/11 happened, all the stuff was pretty much on the East Coast, east of Phoenix-ish, east of Phoenix. So they were grounding the airplanes as quick as they could. And they did a phenomenal job of doing that because some of the airspace was already very busy and already tied up with just the routine flights. So then as the word got to us, stop, we're not taking nothing, don't take it, we're doing lockdown, blah, blah, blah. So I'm on the freeway going to work, and this one exit that I have to take down to San Diego to get to where I work at, just cars backed up. So I'm thinking, okay, somebody ran into somebody somewhere, or whatever. So I'm waiting, so everything's just poked on, looking at the clock, I'm like, you're supposed to be at work. So I called the boss, I said, hey, I'm sitting out in the parking lot here, what? He said, yeah, he says, you'll see when you get on the news. And I didn't listen to the news much back then, so I had no idea what they were talking about. So as I get up to the front gate, and like I said, very secure thing to answer your question. Get up to the front gate, and these Marine guys are standing there with their little, whatever they're called. What are they? He says, can you open your trunk? And I saw everybody else have it. All right, so, he said, you got any weapons back here? No. And once again, I still don't know what's happened. He says, hands up on the car. Okay, I got a badge here now. And so the security cops that we had, there were security cops, and they just standing back letting the Marine guys take over. And so then I get inside the building, I heard what happened. Okay, so there in Los Angeles, we sat there probably for 2 days, and we just worked and watched the various airspace to make sure nobody got through it, nobody did any business. We had a lot of law enforcement, a lot of cops, the FBI, doing all kinds of things. And so that was, I guess, a good experience instead of having to force all the guys down the ground back in the East Coast. But everything was handled very quickly and smoothly and efficiently for what they had to do.
That's good.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you everybody for coming out.